It's the classic chicken and egg question, right? Are journalists reflecting the stigma and the biases in society, or are they creating it and perpetuating it? And the honest answer is probably a bit of both. So, we do our part. The media is powerful, it is influential. So it does have a good effect and a bad effect. So I think we have to live with that and recognize it. That being said, I think people tend to overstate the influence of the media. I think it's much more, it's not a cause and effect. It's not, we write a story that stigmatizes a person with mental illness and everybody goes around hating mentally ill people. It's way more complicated than that. It's, it works very slowly over time. How do you picture people and what kind of language do you use? And that changes slowly, and I think societal attitudes change slowly.
For so long, people have viewed mental illness as something so negative and something maybe that people can control, or something that might be a product of substance abuse, or something that it takes a long time to change attitudes, and people don't want to identify as having a mental illness because people have, other people will have reactions that aren't fair. So I think that we should be doing more stories about people with mental illness who aren't killers, but that's not news, right? The news is the horrible things. And so, of course we're contributing to stigma, and hopefully some of the work we do is also providing some education and moving the debate forward and enhancing understanding, but that's not always the way it works.
We tiptoed around these issues for a long time. We did them badly. And then we finally took a great interest. And, when the media does things, puts their minds to it, they can do things well. And I think that's the case with mental illness and mental health coverage. We've recognized that, yeah, we can do a much better job and people are interested in this and it's useful. I think the sophistication of the reporting has been much, much greater in recent years. I talk to a lot of young people who are really interested in this area. Just the fact that we talk about it makes a huge difference. And when you report stuff, it lends itself to more reporting. So yeah, I think we have to be optimistic about the coverage, but we have to push to make it even better, more sophisticated, more insightful, etc. We can always do better, and we have this real opportunity now that there's interest.
5 years ago, any story about mental illness featured somebody killing somebody, the story of the individual on the bus going into Winnipeg where somebody got decapitated. I mean, a variety of things. They were the only stories. There were no stories about mental illness affects everybody, about here are the signs you ought to look for in a child if they're having a problem, because there are lots of warning signs. There were never positive stories about mental illness, that yes, someone has a mental illness, but it's being treated and they're now okay. So I think that journalism has gone through a significant change in the last, I would say, 5 years, certainly a decade. I mean, and one of my measures of that is I try to keep track roughly of the column inches of stories on mental health in the dailies across the country. And if you go back to the year before the Senate report came out, so the Senate report came out in 2006. So if you look at 2005 to 2013, you will find a very, very steady increase every single year in the number of column inches devoted to mental illness. And secondly, most importantly, the stories that are covered are changing. It's no longer just the dramatic ones and the suicide ones and the gory ones. And even in the case of the gory ones, there's a more balanced attitude coming out of out of journalists, which I attribute in part to the fact that I think journalism schools are changing the way they're teaching this a little bit, quite a bit actually. And I think seasoned journalists are beginning to say it's okay to show the human side of this issue. And I think historically that was not true.